Prologue. The worst sound in the world isn't a scream. It's the quiet, sickening click of a door closing on a life you thought was real. I stood frozen in the opulent, too-bright light of the gallery office, the champagne flute slipping from my numb fingers to shatter silently on the thick Persian rug. It was my engagement party, mere minutes after I'd said yes to the man I thought was my soulmate, and there he was, Rhys, my fiancé, his perfectly tailored suit rumpled, his lips locked onto the mouth of Alexander Thorne, my boss and mentor. The air wasn't just thick with betrayal, it was suffocating, heavy with a humiliation so absolute it felt physical, like a hand pressed over my windpipe. Adrian, wait, it's not what it looks like. Rhys's voice was a panicked, grating lie as he shoved Alexander away, but the damage was done. It was exactly what it looked like. Two men in a tangle of expensive fabric and cheap deceit, laughing at the gentle fool who curated their antiques. It's a mistake I won't repeat, Alexander said, his voice a low, dismissive drawl, already adjusting his silk tie. He didn't even bother to look sorry, only annoyed that his private moment had been interrupted. The ring, Adrian. Give it back. Rhys will need it for someone who isn't quite so predictable. Predictable. That word sliced deeper than the cheating, deeper than the public mockery I knew was coming. I was the reliable, soft-spoken curator who loved history more than confrontation. A gentle soul, an easy mark. They had carved out my heart and were now stepping over the pieces. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. My hands, trembling not with weakness but with a cold, terrifying clarity, went to the platinum band on my finger. As I slid it off, I felt the last anchor to my old, naive life snap. I didn't toss it at them. I placed it carefully on Alexander's polished mahogany desk, right next to a small, priceless Roman coin I'd been cataloging. Keep it, I whispered, the sound raw and unfamiliar even to my own ears. You've already taken everything else of value. I didn't wait for their response. I just walked out of the office, out of the museum, out of the life I'd built on a foundation of lies. The city lights were a dazzling blur through the sudden hot sting of tears that finally broke free. I was adrift, shattered, and utterly, profoundly alone. 2 hours later, huddled in a corner of a sleek, anonymous bar, drowning my grief in a single expensive scotch, the shadow fell over my table. It was a man carved from granite and tailored in darkness, a sharp, cold presence that seemed to consume the surrounding light. He didn't sit. He leaned down, his voice a low, accented rumble that cut through the bar's muted jazz like a knife. Adrian Moreau, he stated, not asked. His eyes, the color of glacial ice, held a terrifying mix of understanding and ruthless calculation. The man who just lost everything to Alexander Thorne. I flinched, pulling back. Who are you? He placed a black, engraved business card on the table, thick and heavy, like a threat. Cassian Vasiliev. He said, straightening to his full, formidable height, and the man who hates Thorne more than he loves his next breath. And I am going to make him pay for taking what was mine. He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting my broken heart absorb his intensity. Then came the proposition, a shocking, impossible deal that felt like a trap, a lifeline and a weapon all at once. Become my fiancé, Mr. Moreau. I'll restore your dignity, give you a new life, and together, we will destroy the man who broke it. My world was already gone. I looked at the card, then up into those cold, compelling eyes. What did I have left to lose? Nothing. I accept, I heard myself say. And in that moment, Adrian Moreau, the gentle museum curator, died. A new, terrifying game had begun. The morning after the catastrophic engagement party felt like waking up in a body that wasn't mine. The air in my tiny rented apartment, usually a haven of quiet comfort, now felt heavy with shame. My hands still smelled faintly of the expensive champagne that had been spilled, a grotesque souvenir of the most humiliating night of my life. Rhys had been texting, a flurry of panicked, self-serving excuses, but I had muted the world. My life was reduced to two objects, a stack of resignation papers I hadn't yet filed, and the heavy, black business card resting on my kitchen counter. Cassian Vasiliev. The name pulsed with an intimidating power that seemed to vibrate even in the still air. Become my fiancé. Destroy the man who broke it. The memory of the bar felt like a fever dream. The man was magnificent, terrifying, and utterly serious. He had told me nothing about why he hated Alexander Thorne, only that the man had ruined his family years ago, and my public humiliation was a perfect, unexpected opportunity for revenge. I was a pawn but a willing one. The thought of watching Alexander and Rhys suffer even a fraction of the pain they had inflicted gave me a dark, unfamiliar surge of energy. Vengeance wasn't a noble emotion, but in that moment, It was the only thing keeping me upright. I finally reached for my phone, but before I could dial the number on the card, it rang. An unknown international number. I answered, my voice still tight from lack of sleep and too many tears. Mr. Moreau. I assumed you would need more than a few hours to process the absurdity of my offer. It was Cassian. His voice, crisp and formal over the line, lacked the seductive menace from the night before, replacing it with a cold, almost clinical efficiency. I've processed it, Mr. Vasiliev, I replied, surprised by my own steady tone. And I've accepted. What happens now? There was a slight, almost imperceptible pause on his end. Good. Directness suits you. I had my team acquire your current location from the bar's security log. Do not leave your apartment. A car will arrive in 30 minutes to take you to my primary residence. Bring only what you can't live without. We need to present a united front immediately. A united front? What exactly do you mean? I asked, a knot tightening in my stomach. This was moving too fast. The lie must be believable, Adrian, he said, his use of my first name a casual yet intimate violation of our professional distance. A public display. We are going to announce our engagement before Alexander Thorne can enjoy his victory lap. But how? We don't have a history or a ring or... Details? He cut in, his voice dismissing my panic. My history is that I want what I want and I take it. My ring will be waiting. Your job is to look shattered, then saved. You will be introduced as my deeply protected partner. Are you prepared to become a performance, Adrian? I looked around my small, shabby living room. Prepared to lose my dignity? I already had. I'm prepared to take back what was stolen from me, Mr. Vasiliev. Then I will see you soon, fiancé. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. 30 minutes. I shoved a few essentials into a worn canvas bag, my grandfather's old watch, a handful of clothes, and a book of Renaissance sketches, leaving behind every piece of furniture, every framed memory tied to Reese. It felt like shedding old skin. Precisely 30 minutes later, a sleek, black Rolls-Royce Ghost, the kind of car you only see in movies, pulled up to the curb of my modest building. The driver, impeccably dressed, held the door for me. As I slid inside, the world outside blurred, taking my old life with it. The journey was silent, through increasingly exclusive parts of the city, until we arrived at a towering, modernist glass and steel penthouse complex overlooking the entire bay. The lobby was all cool marble and hushed respect. Cassian was waiting for me in the immense, minimalist living room of his penthouse, which felt less like a home and more like an art installation. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying view. He stood silhouetted against the bright light, more imposing and dangerously attractive than I remembered. He was wearing dark trousers and an open-collared shirt that somehow looked more formal than a full suit. "Welcome, Adrian," he said, his voice flat. He didn't offer a hand, only gestured to a small velvet box on the marble coffee table between two impossibly plush sofas. "The first piece of the lie," he explained. "Try it on." I moved forward, my legs feeling unsteady. The box held a ring that made my old platinum band look like a trinket. It was a single flawless square-cut sapphire, a deep royal blue, flanked by two princess-cut diamonds. The stone seemed to absorb the light, drawing the eye like a black hole. "Sapphires represent wisdom, loyalty, and fidelity," Cassian noted, a cruel smirk touching his lips. "All things Reese clearly lacks. Wear it as a promise, not of our love, but of my commitment to your revenge." I picked up the ring. It was cold, heavy, and undeniably beautiful. As I slipped it onto my finger, it fit perfectly. A powerful, terrifying symbol of my new, terrifying life. "Now the details," Cassian said, moving swiftly to a large screen that appeared to emerge from the wall. He brought up a photo, an old, grainy image of a sprawling estate, half ruined, then another of a small, stern-looking woman. Alexander Thorne didn't just fire my father. He manipulated a hostile takeover, bankrupting my family and indirectly causing my mother's early death. He didn't take money, he took our heritage, our name, our everything. His voice was devoid of emotion, yet the intensity in his eyes was volcanic. He hated Alexander Thorne with a chilling, focused purity. The fake engagement will serve two purposes. First, it humiliates Alexander and Reese by showing the man they tossed aside was immediately snatched up by me. Secondly, it gives you access. The grand annual charity gala is in 3 days. Alexander will be there. You as my fiancé will be by my side. And we will begin the public unraveling. He walked toward me, his shadow falling over mine. He was too close, too big, radiating a barely contained energy. This is not a game, Adrian. You will be seen with me constantly. You will touch me. You will smile for the cameras. You will look at me like I am your entire world because to the public, I am. And you must never, ever let anyone see the truth. Not a single slip. Do you understand the terms of this performance? His gaze was searing, searching for any flicker of doubt. I didn't want to doubt. I wanted this vengeance. I wanted to see Alexander Thorne's smug face crack. I looked at the sapphire on my finger, a gorgeous, painful lie. I understand, I breathed. I will be your perfect fiancé, Cassian. He didn't smile, but a cold triumph flashed in his eyes. He reached out and, with shocking gentleness, brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. My entire body went rigid. It was the first physical contact, and it felt like a dangerous boundary had been crossed. Good, he murmured, his voice dropping an octave, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated between us. Now let's begin our performance. We have a world to convince. He leaned in closer, his breath warm against my ear. And Adrian, if you are going to sell this lie, you need to look at me differently. Look at me like you already love the man who saved you. I tried. I forced myself to meet his glacial gaze, to find the powerful, protective figure I needed him to be. And for a terrifying second, as I stared into the cold, calculated depths of his eyes, a shiver ran through me. What if I already do? The thought was a betrayal, a warning, and a thrilling possibility all at once. I had walked into a trap of my own making, and the man holding the key was standing right in front of me. First, he said, stepping back abruptly, his cold mask firmly back in place, we need to secure the narrative. My PR team is waiting. Get ready for your first interview, fiancé. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the impossible ring and the echo of my terrifying thought. He was demanding a public lie, but I was starting to fear the real lie was the one I would tell myself about the man I had just promised my life to. Cassian's PR team was less a group of professionals and more a perfectly synchronized machine of image control. They descended upon the penthouse immediately, a stylish, intense woman named Ilara who moved with the speed of a caffeinated panther, and a quiet, meticulous man named Ivan who carried a camera like a weapon. Adrian, darling, you look heartbroken, which is perfect, Ilara announced, sizing me up with a practiced, clinical eye. But you need to look saved, not salvaged. We have 3 goals before the press conference in 2 hours. Establish the timeline, define the narrative, and present the look. The whole world needs to know that Cassian didn't steal you. He rescued you from a devastating public betrayal. I felt like a mannequin being dressed for a window display. Ilara had me change into new clothes, soft gray cashmere and perfectly tailored dark denim that felt alien to my usual tweed and linen. Ivan took a series of candid-looking photographs, me staring wistfully out the window, Cassian's strong hand resting casually on my shoulder, and a close-up of the colossal sapphire ring on my hand. The timeline is crucial, Cassian interjected, leaning against the doorframe, watching the performance with detached amusement. The official story is that Adrian and I have known each other vaguely for months through the high-end art circuit. I sensed his unhappiness. When I saw the public disgrace Reese inflicted, I moved immediately. It proves my decisiveness and validates Adrian's choice to leave a toxic situation for a powerful protector. And the ring? I asked, holding up my hand. It was beautiful, but it screamed billionaire impulse buy. It was a private, impulsive proposal that happened the moment you broke free of Reese, Ilara supplied quickly. Cassian is known for his whirlwind decisions. It adds to the drama and explains the speed. We are selling a high-stakes, passionate romance, Adrian. Think dramatic rescue, not quiet rebound. Cassian walked over to me and my carefully maintained professional distance instantly evaporated. He placed his hands gently on my shoulders, turning me to face him. His proximity was overwhelming, filled with the scent of expensive cologne and a latent, controlled power. Look at me, Adrian, he commanded softly, the intensity in his eyes making it impossible to look away. Reese broke you. You have to convince the world that when you look at me, you see the solid ground you landed on. Not a deal but destiny. Feel it? His thumb brushed the skin beneath my collarbone, and a jolt of genuine heat shot through me. It was a purely physiological reaction, the surprise of the touch, the sheer magnetic force of his attention, but it was enough. I felt my breath catch. That's it, Cassian murmured, his lips curving into the faintest hint of a smile, a rare sight that made my chest tighten. Ivan, now. Get that look. The camera flashed, capturing the dizzying moment of proximity and feigned intimacy. I realized then that Cassian Vasiliev wasn't just powerful. He was a master manipulator of perception. He could conjure emotion from thin air, and he was using me as his instrument. Studio microphone. The first lie, going live. The press conference was held in Cassian's private gallery within the penthouse, a stark white space filled with priceless modern sculptures. The atmosphere was a chaotic mix of flashing cameras, aggressive whispers, and hot, frantic energy. Cassian took the stage first, radiating an air of untouchable authority. He spoke briefly about a new philanthropic endeavor, then paused, his face softening, a masterful transition that pulled every eye to him. "I have a matter of great personal importance," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly. "As many of you know, my close associate Adrian was subject to a vicious and humiliating betrayal this week by his former fiancé, Rhys Davies, and his colleague Alexander Thorne." A wave of gasps and camera flashes erupted. He had dropped their names like bombs. Adrian is a man of integrity and gentle spirit, and to see his kindness exploited filled me with disgust. No one, especially not someone so deserving of respect, should ever be treated as disposable. He turned and extended his hand to me. I walked out, taking his offered hand. The feel of his palm, warm, dry, and impossibly firm, sent a stabilizing force up my arm. I was terrified, but he was a rock. I have known Adrian for some time, and my respect for him quickly grew into something much deeper, Cassian continued, squeezing my hand protectively. When I saw him break free from that toxic situation, I realized that life is too short for hesitation. I asked Adrian to marry me that same night. He looked down at me, and in his eyes, I saw not the cold strategist, but a carefully constructed tenderness, a look that suggested quiet devotion and fierce protectiveness. I instinctively leaned into him, letting the sapphire blaze under the lights. Adrian said yes, he finished, a genuine-sounding note of pride in his voice. "We are engaged. Our relationship may be accelerated, but it is built on a foundation of mutual respect and an absolute commitment to his happiness." Alexander Thorne stole Adrian's job and fiancé. He did not steal his future. That, I have taken upon myself to secure. The reporters went wild. "Mr. Vasiliev, is this revenge? Mr. Moreau, how do you feel about Rhys and Alexander now? When is the wedding?" Cassian shielded me expertly, pulling me close. "My feelings on Alexander Thorne are well documented, but this is about Adrian," he said sharply. "He is my focus. As for the wedding, it will be when Adrian is ready. We are taking this at his pace." He turned to me, his hand resting on my waist, a silent cue. I had to speak. I focused on the truth of my pain, not the lie of the love. I was blindsided and heartbroken. I managed, my voice soft but steady. But in the darkest moment, Cassian gave me back my dignity. He saw my worth when others tried to erase it. I have never felt safer or more respected. I looked up at him, letting the genuine relief I felt at being rescued from public ridicule shine through. "He is my rock." Cassian gave a subtle, decisive nod to Alara, who immediately ended the conference. We were ushered out, the echoes of the reporters' shouts fading behind the closed door. The uncomfortable calm. Back in the quiet sanctuary of the living room, the tension I hadn't realized I was holding finally broke. I sank onto the nearest sofa, the sapphire ring feeling impossibly heavy on my finger. "That was effective," I whispered, closing my eyes. "It was a masterclass in narrative control," Cassian corrected, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid into heavy crystal glasses. He handed one to me. "To the beginning of the end for Alexander Thorne." We clinked glasses. The scotch was smooth, the burn immediate and grounding. "What is the next step?" I asked, looking up at him. He had shed the public facade completely, his expression reverting to a cool, focused intensity. "The gala in 3 nights. It is where Alexander will be celebrated. We will use the opportunity to humiliate him publicly. But first," he said, moving to sit on the opposite sofa, "we need to establish house rules. We share this penthouse. We need a plausible history for anyone who asks. Staff, business partners, family. What is your favorite film? What book did you supposedly recommend to me? What is my most irritating habit?" We spent the next 2 hours fabricating a relationship, layer by painstaking layer. He was observant, remembering small, personal details I had revealed during our painful exchange last night. "You hate the smell of cloves," he noted. "You only drink Earl Grey tea, never black coffee. You have a terrible memory for faces, but recall every minute detail of a historical artifact. And you," I countered, feeling a strange camaraderie in the process, "drink your coffee black, You never wear color unless absolutely required, and your favorite painter is Turner. A shock, given your cold exterior. Cassian paused, looking genuinely surprised. How did you know about Turner? I heard you mention his name to Ivan while they were staging the photos, I said simply. You spoke about his use of light and chaos. It was telling. A flicker of something unreadable, perhaps respect, crossed his face. Telling indeed. Perhaps you are not as predictable as your ex claimed. The conversation continued until late, creating a believable web of shared life. But as the night wore on, the physical arrangement became impossible to ignore. Where will I sleep? I asked, suddenly shy. Cassian stood up, his height dominating the room again. The guest suites are on the lower floor, but that won't work. Why not? Because a publicly engaged couple, especially one as passionately devoted as ours, would not be sleeping in separate wings of the penthouse, he explained, walking toward a private corridor. It invites questions, suspicion. We are selling devotion, Adrian. And devotion requires proximity. He stopped at a heavy, lacquered door and opened it. It was his primary suite, a massive, minimalist space dominated by a king-sized bed and a stunning view. We will share the bed, he stated, turning back to me, his expression perfectly neutral. There is no obligation for anything more than sleeping in the same space. It is a necessary sacrifice for the sake of the lie. My heart hammered against my ribs. Share a bed with this man? This beautiful, terrifying, powerful stranger who felt both like my savior and my jailer? I understand, I managed, my voice barely a thread. Good. He walked into the room and began unbuttoning his shirt, not looking at me. The clothes in the walk-in are for you. Take what you need. And remember, Adrian, he said, stripping off his shirt to reveal a lean, sculpted torso, a map of hard, defined muscle. The lie starts now. The moment you cross this threshold, we are playing house. I stood on the polished stone floor, staring at his broad, perfect back, the tension in the room thick enough to choke on. I had agreed to his ruthless deal, but I hadn't prepared for the intimacy of his cold strategy. I had signed up to destroy my enemy, but I hadn't calculated the risk to my own vulnerable, healing heart. I took a shaky breath and stepped across the threshold, closing the door behind me. Sleeping with the enemy. I stood frozen in the middle of Cassian's immense bedroom, feeling like a field mouse caught in a lion's den. He was already in the ensuite, the sound of running water a distant, polite shield. I was supposed to act like this was normal, like sharing a bed with a ruthless billionaire who planned to use me as a weapon of vengeance was just another Tuesday night. I found the walk-in closet. It was larger than my entire old apartment and, true to Cassian's word, stocked with new clothes for me, high-end, luxurious fabrics in my preferred neutral palette. I chose a pair of silk pajama bottoms and a soft cotton tee. When I emerged, Cassian was already back in the room. He was wearing dark gray silk lounge pants and nothing else. My breath hitched. In the harsh glow of the ambient city lights filtering through the window, his chest and shoulders were a breathtaking study in power. Scars, faint and thin, tracked across his left shoulder blade, looking less like accidents and more like historical artifacts, evidence of a past he didn't talk about. He glanced up, catching my gaze lingering on the scars. There was no embarrassment, only a cold acknowledgement. They're old, he stated, his voice flat. He walked to the window, gazing out over the glittering expanse of the city he seemed to effortlessly command. Family business isn't always clean. I quickly looked away, my face heating. I apologize. I didn't mean to stare. You are my fiancé now, Adrian. You are permitted to look. Just ensure that the curiosity doesn't extend beyond the surface of this arrangement. His tone was a sharp reminder of the boundary between us. He turned and approached the bed. Felt like watching a predator move. He pulled back the covers on the far side, away from the door. I am not a disruptive sleeper. Stay on your side. If you need anything, the room controls are by your head. I nodded mutely, feeling the absurdity of the situation pressing down on me. I crossed the room and slipped into the sheets. The linen was impossibly soft, smelling faintly of clean, masculine scent, his scent. The distance between us in that massive bed felt both vast and terrifyingly small. I lay stiffly on my back, listening to the steady, deep rhythm of his breathing. The silence was louder than any conversation. Adrian, Cassian's voice finally cut through the darkness, low and unexpected. Yes. I know what it feels like to be erased. To have everything you built destroyed by one greedy man. He spoke to the ceiling, his voice devoid of emotion, yet the words landed like stones. My father died a broken man after Thorne's maneuvers. My mother never recovered. When I found out what Thorne and Davies did to you, the public humiliation, it was a perfect echo of my own family's pain, only condensed into one night. The words were a thread, pulling me toward the dark, complex truth of his motivation. Your hate for him, it's real, I whispered. It is the purest thing I possess, he confirmed. It has been a decade-long discipline. I want him to hurt the way my family hurt. Slowly, publicly, and irreversibly. He paused. I needed a catalyst. I needed someone the world could genuinely root for, someone innocent. That's you, Adrian. The gentle curator betrayed by his trusted men. We are two wounds aligning for a shared, brutal goal. His honesty was shocking. It didn't make him kind, but it made him real. He was laying out his terrible, beautiful plan, and he wasn't hiding the cost. I was so humiliated, I confessed, the words escaping before I could stop them, the darkness making me brave. Not just the cheating, but how easy I was to discard. Reese and Alexander treated me like a secondary exhibit, fragile but ultimately replaceable. Predictable. A muscle twitched in Cassian's jaw. He shifted slightly, turning his head on the pillow so he was looking directly at me. Predictable men are easily manipulated, yes, he agreed, his eyes gleaming faintly in the darkness. But a man who has lost everything, who still chooses to fight, that man is dangerous. Thorne thinks you are soft. He thinks I merely bought a pretty diversion. We will show them both that they were wrong. He reached out slowly, deliberately, his large, warm hand covering the hand that wore the sapphire ring. It wasn't a romantic gesture, it felt like a signature on a contract. Sleep now, Adrian. You have to look rested and radiant for the papers tomorrow. Tonight you are safe. No one can touch you here. Not Reese, not Thorne. You are mine now. And I protect what is mine. His words, brutal in their ownership, were strangely comforting. He wasn't promising love, but he was promising safety and vengeance. In my shattered state, that was infinitely more valuable. I felt the tension drain from my shoulders, and for the first time in days, I began to drift towards sleep, his firm grip on my hand the only anchor in the darkness. The morning ritual. I woke before dawn, surprisingly rested. Cassian was already gone. I felt a fleeting sense of disappointment. The strange comfort of his presence had been real, but then I saw a note on the pillow next to me, weighted down by a sleek, expensive pen. Meeting with my solicitor regarding the prenuptial agreement. It protects your interests fully, should you choose to exit the arrangement after our shared goal is achieved. Your breakfast and a change of clothes are laid out. Be ready at 10 a.m. We have a public luncheon to attend. Focus on the art of performance. CV. The formality was back, the soft moment of shared vulnerability replaced by the cold reality of business. I appreciated the thoughtfulness of the prenup. Cassian was honoring his commitment to my security, even within the framework of the lie. I dressed in the clothes he'd chosen for me, a beautiful tailored suit jacket in a deep slate color, paired with slim trousers. It was a powerful look, instantly boosting my confidence. At exactly 10 a.m., Cassian strode into the room, looking impossibly sharp in a dark gray suit. His eyes swept over me, and a subtle nod of approval confirmed I had met his standards. The media response is exactly what we wanted, he said, handing me his tablet. The headlines were inescapable. Billionaire Cassian Vasiliev snaps up betrayed curator Adrian Moreau in whirlwind engagement. And Thorne's cruelty leads to Vasiliev's vengeance. My photo, the one Ivan had taken where I was looking up at Cassian with vulnerable admiration, was everywhere. We go live again today, Cassian stated, taking my arm, a firm, possessive touch that felt natural now. We are attending a charity lunch hosted by Lady Evelyn Albright. Thorne will be there. He expects you to be a sobbing mess hiding in shame. We will deliver the opposite, a man loved, protected, and thriving. The luncheon was a whirlwind of socialite whispers, clinking glasses, and flashing jewels. I held onto Cassian's arm like he was the only lifeline in a stormy sea, and he, in turn, radiated an air of total devotion to me, introducing me not just as his fiancé, but as a brilliant mind whose curatorial career he would fully fund. Then across the crowded room I saw him, Alexander Thorne. He looked exactly the same, smug, impeccably dressed, surrounded by sycophants. But when his eyes landed on Cassian and me, a flicker of genuine shock crossed his face, instantly followed by a forced, poisonous smile. He walked over, Reese trailing awkwardly behind him. Reese looked pale and disheveled, clearly already regretting his choice. Cassian, Thorne said smoothly, extending a hand to Cassian, completely ignoring me. How unexpected to see you with Adrian. Quite the rebound story you've orchestrated. Must be expensive. Cassian didn't take his hand. His glacial gaze never left Thorn's. Alexander. I buy what is valuable, not what is cheap, Cassian replied, his voice dangerously low, his grip on my arm tightening. Adrian is valuable. You, however, are cheap goods. As is Reese, it seems. He finally looked at Reese, and the pure contempt in his eyes made Reese visibly shrink. I came for Adrian, not for you, Cassian, Thorn countered, his smile faltering. Adrian, my dear boy. Let's not be hasty. This is just a game to him. Come back to the gallery. Your position is still. Alexander, I interrupted, the sound of my own firm voice surprising me. I pushed past my old fear and faced him, standing taller with Cassian's support at my side. I held up my hand, letting the sapphire blaze a final, humiliating statement. My position now is where I belong, beside a man who values integrity over deceit. Keep your job. I have a new life, and thanks to you it's far richer in every sense of the word. Reese finally found his voice, a pathetic whine. Adrian, I still love you, you know that. This is just a reaction. Cassian stepped forward, placing his entire body between Reese and me. The silent threat was immediate and absolute. Walk away, Reese, Cassian commanded. Your betrayal cost Adrian his peace. Bought me a weapon. You will not speak to him again. If you do, I will ensure every mistake you've ever made in your life is made public. Start now, or you'll wish Alexander Thorn had never even glanced your way. The power of his threat was overwhelming. Reese, terrified, backed away, pulling Thorn with him. Thorn's forced smile was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. He had underestimated us. Cassian watched them retreat, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. He turned back to me, the sharpness in his eyes softening just slightly. Well done, Adrian. You are not just a pawn, you are becoming a queen. That defiance was genuine. I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had faced my tormentors and won the first round. It was easy, I admitted, lowering my voice. You gave me the shield I needed. But as the day drew to a close and we were back in the penthouse, preparing for the most critical moment, the gala, a new, more personal tension arose. Cassian was going through my clothes, pulling out the outfit for the night. This is not a costume party, Adrian. This is war, he said, holding up a meticulously tailored tuxedo. The gala is in 2 nights. We need a final rehearsal. He looked at me, a dangerous glint in his eyes. We need to practice our first public kiss. The air left my lungs. A fake engagement required a public kiss, a definitive, passionate display. My heart was pounding, a wild, trapped bird against my ribs. It has to be believable, Adrian, he continued, stepping closer. It has to look like I can't keep my hands off you. It has to look like you are desperate for me. He was inches away, his cold, concentrated power a dizzying current. The lie was about to become very, very real. The necessary intimacy. The proximity was unbearable. Cassian was standing so close I could feel the residual heat from his body, and the sharp scent of his cologne was filling my senses. His demand, the public kiss, echoed in the vast, silent room, demanding a response my terrified nerves couldn't provide. A rehearsal? I managed, my voice sounding weak and thin. Isn't that overkill? Cassian's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly, zeroing in on my hesitation. In this game, Adrian, there is no such thing as overkill. This kiss is the linchpin of the entire narrative. It must convey passion, ownership, and undeniable, accelerated chemistry. If we look awkward or distant, Thorn will see the cracks in our foundation and exploit them. He took one more step, closing the final gap between us. I had to tilt my head back to look up at him. You look nervous, he observed, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register that sent shivers down my spine. Don't be. This is simply choreography. A scene we must execute perfectly for the audience. He lifted his hands, cupping my face gently, his thumbs resting just beneath my cheekbones. The touch was startlingly soft, yet possessed a firmness that demanded my attention. I need you to forget that I am Cassian Vasiliev, your business partner in revenge, he instructed, his eyes locked on mine. I need you to look at me and see the man who saved you from your worst moment. The man who saw your worth when everyone else discarded you. Access the gratitude, Adrian. Channel the relief. I closed my eyes for a split second, forcing myself to remember the crushing humiliation of the gallery office, the sheer relief of having this powerful force shield me from public scorn. Cassian wasn't love, but he was safety. He was retribution. When I opened my eyes, I met his gaze with a flicker of genuine appreciation, mixed with the intense fear of what was about to happen. Good, he murmured, noticing the shift. He began the motion slowly, deliberately. He leaned in, giving me time to retreat, but I held my ground. His eyes dropped to my mouth, and the anticipation was a tightening wire in my chest. He wasn't cold now, he was focused, intent, radiating a controlled, dangerous heat. His lips finally met mine. It wasn't the tentative, nervous contact I'd expected. It was immediate and firm. His mouth was warm and expertly commanding. It was a kiss designed for a camera, openly passionate, possessive, and meant to consume. He deepened the contact, pulling me closer by the silk lapels of my dressing gown, and the sheer force of the intimacy stole my breath. I felt a dizzying disorientation. This wasn't just choreography. This was a collision of two people using physical connection to achieve a psychological goal. But my body didn't know the difference between a calculated lie and a genuine moment. My hands instinctively fisted in the fine fabric of his shirt. He pulled back slowly, maintaining intense eye contact, his breath mingling with mine. His pupils were slightly dilated, and a faint flush had risen on the stark angles of his cheekbones. The cool detachment was gone, replaced by a momentary raw intensity that frightened and thrilled me. "Analysis," he stated, his voice slightly husky, his professionalism instantly snapping back into place. I blinked, still reeling from the unexpected rush. It was very convincing. Convincing is not enough. It must be indelible. "You stiffened," he pointed out, a slight frown crossing his brow. "A fiancé desperate for the love of his protector would not be rigid. You must relax into it. You must give the impression that you are drinking me in. We will try again." And so we tried again. And again. Each repetition blurred the edges of the performance. The second kiss was less shocking. The third was desperate, fueled by the nervous energy and manufactured adrenaline of the pretense. By the fifth attempt, when his hand moved to the back of my neck, tilting my head just so, I was no longer thinking about Alexander Thorne. I was only thinking about the pressure of Cassian's mouth, the taste of scotch and mint, and the terrifying realization that this choreography was stirring something deep and complicated inside me. I realized I was leaning into the kiss, my arms wrapped around his waist, my fear giving way to a startling, confusing desire for the comfort and power he represented. I was craving the safety of his possession. When he finally ended the rehearsal, his chest rising and falling quickly, he didn't immediately pull away. He rested his forehead against mine, and the silence was charged, heavy with unspoken implication. "The fifth attempt was perfect," he said, his voice quiet. "It was convincing because you finally allowed yourself to feel the truth of the moment, the desire for escape, for power, for safety. Now carry that fire to the gala, Adrian. Burn them with it." He stepped back then, the distance immediately re-establishing the wall between us. He was a master of control, able to turn the intensity on and off like a switch. I, on the other hand, felt completely unsettled, my heart still racing from the necessary intimacy of the lie. The weight of expectations. The following 2 days were a blur of meticulous preparation, clothes fittings, security briefings, and further integration into Cassian's world. He took me to a private, sealed-off section of the museum I used to work at, the Moreau Wing, and announced his intention to fund a new, massive restoration project in my name. "This is not just revenge, Adrian," Cassian explained as we stood in the empty, dusty wing. "This is the establishment of your new professional identity. You are not just a curator. You are the respected figurehead of a significant cultural endeavor. Thorne took your job, I will give you an empire." His generosity was staggering and completely transactional. Everything was an asset, a move on the chessboard. The night of the gala finally arrived. The tension in the penthouse was thick and electric. I was dressed in the tuxedo, a midnight blue, perfectly tailored piece that made me feel powerful and unrecognizable. Cassian, in a classic black velvet jacket, was devastatingly handsome. We looked like a perfect, inseparable pair of dangerous elites. As we stood by the elevator, waiting to descend into the glittering crowd, Cassian looked me over, his eyes scanning for any fault. "Remember the protocol," he stated, his voice low and serious. "Do not let Reese or Thorne isolate you. If you are approached, smile, reference our whirlwind romance, and always, always touch me. Your hand on my back, my arm around your waist. We are physically inseparable tonight." I nodded, adjusting the cuff links he had given me, small antique sapphire pieces that matched the ring. "What if they try to discredit me?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "They will," Cassian replied, taking my hand and bringing it to his lips for a quick, possessive kiss, a gesture meant to establish our dynamic. "Thorne will accuse you of gold digging, of using me. Your answer must be simple. I chose a future of integrity and strength over a past of lies and humiliation. Then you look at me as if I am the only truth you possess. The elevator doors opened onto the vast, echoing ballroom. The air was heavy with the scent of expensive perfume, old money, and ruthless ambition. It was a world I had only glimpsed from the periphery, but tonight I was walking into the epicenter, on the arm of the most dangerous man in the room. We made a spectacular entrance. The whispers ceased, replaced by a wave of intense scrutiny. Everyone knew the story. Everyone was watching for the cracks. Cassian's presence was magnetic. He worked the room, introducing me with a casual pride that sold the lie perfectly. But I kept searching the crowd, the anticipation of confronting Alexander Thorne and Rhys Davies making my palms sweat. It didn't take long. They appeared by the bar, Thorne radiating cold confidence and Rhys looking miserable and out of place in a borrowed tux. They were watching us. Cassian saw them too. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear, sending a dizzying rush through me. "Showtime, fiancé," he murmured, his voice a thrilling command. "Remember the fifth kiss. Let them watch you choose me." He led me directly toward them, a predator approaching his prey. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. This wasn't just revenge, it was the definitive end of my old life and the terrifying beginning of my new one. As we reached the bar, Cassian pulled me close, his arm a steel band around my waist. Thorne smiled, a patronizing, toxic gesture. "Adrian." "Cassian." "The spectacle is magnificent," Thorne drawled. "I almost believe it myself." Before I could speak, Cassian cut him off, his voice lethal. "Believe this," he said simply. He turned to me, his gaze intense, and without warning, his mouth descended onto mine. It wasn't the practiced rehearsal. It was raw, immediate, and utterly consuming. Cassian kissed me with a depth of manufactured passion that left no doubt in anyone's mind. His free hand cradled the back of my head, and I responded instantly, instinctively, wrapping my arms around his neck, pouring all my pain, my defiance, and my terrifying, burgeoning desire for this man into the contact. The crowd noise faded completely. It was just us, in a desperate, public embrace that was half performance, half a sudden, frightening burst of genuine need. When he finally broke the kiss, he rested his forehead against mine, breathing heavily. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked only at me, his eyes dark with something I couldn't decipher. Was it triumph or something more? He slowly raised his head, turning his glacial stare back to Alexander Thorne and Rhys Davies, who stood frozen, their faces etched with shock and white-hot fury. The humiliation was total. "Any more questions, Alexander?" Cassian asked, his voice smooth and utterly victorious, his arm pulling me even tighter against his side. Thorne was speechless, his face mottled with rage. He had lost. But as I looked up at Cassian, riding the dizzying high of the victory and the confusion of that powerful kiss, I realized something terrifying. The audience was convinced, but so was I. The line between the lie and the truth was gone. The silence that followed Cassian's victorious question was deafening. Alexander Thorne's face was a study in defeated fury, the kind of look that promises payback, but only after absorbing a deep, catastrophic blow. Rhys, utterly pale, looked like he might vomit. They knew they had been thoroughly and publicly bested. Cassian didn't wait for a response. He simply smiled, a cold, shark-like flash of white teeth, and then turned, pulling me away from the disaster zone and deeper into the glittering crowd. He didn't relax his grip. His hand remained firmly anchored on the small of my back, a constant, possessive weight. As we walked, the crowd parted, whispers trailing in our wake. Cassian was the conqueror, and I was his prize. "Mission accomplished," Cassian murmured into my ear, his breath still slightly ragged. "The narrative is locked. They will be talking about that kiss for weeks." My blood was still singing, a chaotic mix of adrenaline, triumph, and the lingering heat of his lips. "It was powerful," I managed, my voice sounding shaky. "It had to be," he replied, but his voice lacked its usual clinical detachment. It was deeper, rougher, as if the performance had cost him something too. We stayed for another hour, moving as a singular, untouchable unit. I played the part of the devoted fiancé flawlessly, meeting every gaze with the shining sapphire and the conviction of a man utterly loved. But every time Cassian's hand brushed my neck, or when he leaned in to murmur a private joke about the hideous art on the walls, the line between performance and reality thinned further. The fear was morphing into a dizzying attraction. Finally, Cassian signaled our departure. The moment we were back in the black car, speeding away from the ballroom lights, the manufactured tension broke. I sagged against the plush leather, suddenly exhausted. Cassian watched me, his expression unreadable. You exceeded expectations, Adrian, he said. Thorn is wounded. Reese is irrelevant. The first major phase of our arrangement is complete. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. My lips still felt too sensitive, too aware of his touch. The kiss wasn't exactly according to the rehearsal, I admitted, my voice low. No, he agreed, a slight tension in his voice. It wasn't. It had conviction. You sold the desperation perfectly. You responded beautifully. I was responding to the moment, I argued, turning to face him. The lie was getting too heavy. I was responding to the absolute relief of watching them lose. It wasn't about you, Cassian. It was about the victory. He looked at me for a long, silent moment, those glacial eyes searching for the truth. You lie to yourself well, Adrian. But you don't lie to me. What we just did in front of those people, that level of intimacy, it changes the terms whether you admit it or not. He reached across the space between us and traced the line of my jaw with his finger, a feather-light, devastating touch. I told you I protect what is mine. You're mine. And tonight I felt a proprietary impulse that was difficult to contain. His eyes held a flicker of something dangerously close to genuine desire. Let's not pretend the physical attraction isn't there, Adrian. It is. It's part of the danger of this arrangement. The smartest thing we can do now is acknowledge the threat it poses to our boundaries. I inhaled sharply, my mind racing. He was right. He was brutally, completely honest, and I hated him for it, and yet I was drawn to his directness. And what do we do about it? I whispered. Cassian dropped his hand, retreating back into his cold, calculating shell. We ignore it. We return to the purpose. We use it to further the lie, and we do not allow it to derail the mission. House the unsettling return. Back in the penthouse, the atmosphere was suddenly awkward and charged. The shared bedroom, which had become a strange place of comfort, now felt like a suffocating trap. I quickly retreated to the bathroom, needing the cold marble and bright light to ground me. When I finally emerged, Cassian was already in bed, reading a financial report on a tablet, the very picture of detached concentration. He looked up when I entered. Don't worry, he said, setting the tablet down. The performance is over for the night. You can sleep in peace. The next phase requires distance, not proximity. He sounded completely in control, forcing me back into the role of the business partner. I slipped into bed, maintaining a wider space between us than usual, trying to ignore the lingering scent of him on the sheets. I lay awake for hours, the image of his eyes during the kiss, dark, intense, and unguarded, flashing behind my eyelids. The irony was devastating. I was falling for the man who saw me as nothing more than a valuable asset, a tool for revenge. Cassian? I finally whispered into the dark. I'm awake, he replied immediately. Why are you going to this extent? The public humiliation was enough. Why the Moreau wing? Why the total financial backing of my career? This goes beyond simple vengeance for your family's name. The silence stretched, thicker and more profound than usual. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight, low, and filled with a pain I hadn't heard before. Thorn didn't just ruin my father, Cassian confessed, turning onto his side to face me, the darkness shrouding his expression. He used my father's greatest passion, the one thing he poured his heart into, a restoration project for his beloved city, and he let it crumble. He took something beautiful and made it rot out of spite. He paused, and I could feel the coiled tension emanating from him. You, Adrian, are the exact antithesis of that destruction. You are beauty focused on preservation. You are soft but strong enough to survive Thorn's cruelty. Restoring your dignity and career is symbolic. It is my way of rebuilding what Thorn tried to destroy, the very concept of integrity and honest endeavor. It was an unplanned confession, a crack in his granite facade. He wasn't just a ruthless prince. He was a scarred son seeking symbolic atonement for his father's ruined dream. He saw me not just as a weapon, but as a living, breathing emblem of the beauty he sought to restore. I felt a rush of unexpected tenderness, a deep, aching sympathy for the little boy who watched his family crumble. I understand, I whispered. I'm sorry for your loss. He accepted the sympathy with a tight nod. Don't be sorry, Adrian. Be useful. This entire act is about reclaiming the narrative of dignity from the hands of villains. The next step is personal, and it needs you at your most convincing. What is it? We are going to visit my grandmother, the matriarch of the Vasiliev family, he stated, his voice returning to business. She is formidable, highly traditional, and currently furious that I have rushed into this engagement without her approval. She is also the last person Thorn would dare disrespect. If she accepts you, the engagement becomes ironclad, institutionally recognized. If she rejects you, the cracks will show and Thorn will strike. The pressure was back, heavier than ever. My role wasn't just to be Cassian's lover in public. It was to convince the last true holdout of his fractured family that I was worthy of their name. "I won't fail you, Cassian," I promised, my voice firm with renewed purpose. "I will convince her." "Good," he replied, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. "Because Alexander Thorn is currently making moves. He's trying to sabotage the Moreau wing funding. He knows the symbolic value. The sooner my grandmother is convinced, the sooner he is neutralized." He turned away then, signaling the end of the conversation. But the connection, forged in the heat of the gala and solidified by his confession, lingered. I closed my eyes, realizing the stakes had been raised. I wasn't just fighting for my own redemption anymore. I was fighting for Cassian's family name and the memory of his father. I drifted off to sleep, feeling a strange mixture of fear and belonging. I was in bed with the man who held my future, and my heart was starting to belong to the man who held my past. The final strike. The air in the private conference room was thick with the scent of leather, old paper, and unspoken power. This was not a gala, it was a tribunal. The room was populated by stern, unsmiling regulators and the heads of several major cultural institutions, all seated around a massive, polished mahogany table. Alexander Thorn was there too, having been summoned under the pretense of a clarification meeting regarding his gallery's recent audits. He was smug but visibly uneasy. Cassian and I walked in precisely on time, our entrance quiet but devastating. Cassian was wearing a dark, imposing suit, and I was by his side, the blue sapphire blazing on my hand, looking poised and utterly committed. Thorn's eyes immediately darted to the ring, then to Cassian, a slow, toxic hatred brewing in his stare. "Cassian, this is unnecessary drama," Thorn sneered, attempting a dismissive laugh. "Bringing your new acquisition to a private financial discussion? Does he even understand the difference between a balance sheet and a sketchpad?" The insult was direct, aimed at undercutting my professional competence one last time. Cassian merely placed a hand firmly on my shoulder, letting the gesture speak volumes. He walked to the head of the table, pulling out a slim, encrypted hard drive. "Mr. Thorn, this is not a discussion about balance sheets. It is about accountability," Cassian announced, his voice steady and lethal. "And Adrian is here because he is the living testament to the ethical decay you represent." He presented the drive to the lead regulator. "This contains conclusive evidence of several years of insider trading, market manipulation, and the embezzlement of funds from the city's cultural endowments, the same corrupt strategies you used to dismantle the Vasiliev family and, more recently, to try and sabotage the Moreau wing funding." A wave of shocked murmurs rippled around the table. Thorn's forced composure began to crack. "This is absurd, Cassian. A fabricated smear campaign. You have a vendetta." "I have facts, Alexander," Cassian countered, leaning over the table, his eyes locked with Thorn's. "And Adrian has a testimony. Regulators, Mr. Moreau was your associate and victim. He can testify to Mr. Thorn's repeated attempts to corrupt him, and his ultimate betrayal, proving a pattern of using trusted relationships for financial gain." All eyes turned to me. This was the moment of ultimate victory, and ultimate exposure. I stepped forward, gripping the edge of the table, drawing strength from the sapphire and Cassian's unwavering presence behind me. I focused on the truth of my pain, the one thing that transcended the lie of the engagement. For years I looked up to Alexander Thorn as a mentor. I began, my voice clear and firm. When he and Rhys Davies humiliated me, they weren't just ending an engagement, they were erasing my dignity. But their cruelty was born from arrogance. Alexander believed he could ruin anyone who stood in his way, my ex-fiancé, the Vasiliev family, and me. He is a predator who uses trust as his weapon. I looked directly at Thorn, who was now utterly defeated, his face ashen. "I am here tonight not because I am a pawn of Cassian Vasiliev's revenge, but because I am a man who was saved by an opportunity to seek justice. Alexander, you took my job, you took my relationship, but you will not take the truth. Your ambition is built on rot. And tonight that ambition ends." The lead regulator gave a curt nod. The evidence was overwhelming, and my emotional testimony provided the necessary motive and context. Thorn's fate was sealed. Before security escorted Thorn out, a desperate, final snarl escaped him. "You think this is real, Adrian? You're just a pretty distraction he'll tire of. He's using you to finish his father's game." Cassian didn't even flinch. As Thorn was pulled away, shouting futile threats, Cassian simply looked at the remaining regulators. The matter is concluded. Mr. Moreau and I have a wedding to plan. We left the conference room and stepped into the quiet luxury of the private elevator. The victory was absolute. Thorn was finished. The revenge was complete. The moment the doors closed, the adrenaline crashed. I leaned against the cool metal wall, utterly exhausted and flooded with relief. "It's over," I whispered, almost disbelieving. Cassian stepped toward me, his gaze softer now, the cold intensity replaced by a profound sense of closure. He didn't touch me, but the air around us was charged. "It is over," he confirmed. "My father is avenged. The integrity of the Vasiliev name is restored. Your name is restored. And the Moreau wing will be funded without delay. You won, Adrian." I met his eyes, the question that had burned since the gala escaping my lips. "The lie is done, Cassian. The mission is complete. What happens now?" He reached out and gently took my hand, his thumb tracing the sapphire. This wasn't the signature on a contract. This felt like a question. The terms of our agreement were simple. I help you get revenge, you help me secure my legacy. The prenup protects you. You are free to leave, to take the funding for your work, to find a quiet life. He paused, and his voice dropped to a low, rough confession. "But Adrian, the lie, it became dangerously complicated for me." He lifted my hand and pressed a genuine, lingering kiss to my palm, right over the sapphire. This kiss was nothing like the performance. It was slow, tender, and intensely vulnerable. When I kissed you at the gala, it wasn't just to convince the crowd. When you stood next to me and fought Babushka Elena's scrutiny, it wasn't just to secure my family's approval. I saw your quiet strength, your defiance in the face of absolute betrayal, and I realized you weren't an asset, Adrian. You are the only person who has ever seen the cost of my vengeance, and still chose to stand by me. He finally looked into my eyes, and the usual glacial blue was warm, almost molten. "The revenge is over, but I don't want the rescue to end. I promised you dignity and I promised you safety. I want to spend the rest of my life delivering on those promises. I have always been a man of ruthlessness, but with you, I want to learn tenderness. I need your calm, Adrian. I need your integrity. I need you to make this performance real." Tears welled in my eyes. This wasn't the powerful, cold man I signed a contract with. This was a profoundly lonely man shedding his scars and admitting need. "Cassian," I choked out, a wave of love and relief washing over me. I walked into a deal for revenge, but I fell in love with the man who saved me. The man beneath the calculation. "I love your ruthlessness because you use it to protect what you believe in. I don't want the prenup. I want the truth." I reached up and cupped his formidable jaw, pulling his face down to mine. This time I initiated the kiss. It was gentle, a solemn promise, filled with all the pain, suspense, and ultimate hope of our journey. It was our first real kiss. When we finally broke apart, the vast space of the elevator no longer felt intimidating but intimate. "So what is the plan now, Mr. Vasiliev?" I asked, a genuine, joyful smile finally breaking through the years of pain. Cassian smiled back, a devastating, real smile that lit up his eyes and banished the last shadow of the cold prince. "The plan, Mr. Moreau, is a real wedding. A very small, very private one. And then we begin the most complicated mission of all. A life of shared, unconditional devotion. And a permanent, publicly known, happy ending. I will never let anyone hurt you again." He pulled me into a fierce embrace, holding me not as a possession, but as a beloved equal. I was no longer the soft curator, nor the vengeful pawn. I was Adrian Vasiliev, loved by the most powerful, kind-hearted man I had ever known. The performance was over and the real life was finally beginning.